The night I realized I was invisible, people assume kitchens are loud places. Pots banging, voices overlapping, someone always asking where the salt is. But that night my kitchen was loud in a different way, not with noise, but with everything I hadn't said in years. Honestly, Lena, she laughed from the doorway, 25 or 30 people, who even cares? You've got time, just cook. I didn't respond. I untied my apron slowly, like stretching the moment might give me an excuse to disappear. For a second I just stood there staring at the counter like it owed me an explanation for how I ended up here again. Same kitchen, same chipped countertop, same clock above the fridge ticking like it had somewhere better to be. But I felt different, tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. This wasn't the first time, it never was. Every gathering somehow became my responsibility. Every small thing turned into a production. And I never argued because somewhere along the way being reliable became my entire personality. I tied the apron back on and turned toward the stove. My hands moved automatically. Chop, stir, taste, adjust. Muscle memory doing what my heart was too exhausted to argue with. The knife hit the cutting board in a steady rhythm, and with every sound, memories crept in. I thought about my mother, how she used to hum while cooking, how food used to feel like love instead of labor. Back then, nobody counted heads, nobody treated care like a transaction. Back then, showing up was enough. At some point, that changed. The pot started to boil over. I lowered the heat just in time, steam filling the air, fogging my glasses. I wondered how easy it must be to say who cares when you're not the one carrying everything. Voices drifted in from the living room, guests arriving, laughter, phones buzzing. Someone asking if dinner was almost ready, like time was something I controlled. I checked the clock, not enough time, never enough time. I caught my reflection in the microwave door, a woman in her 40s who looked older than she felt. Hair damp, eyes heavy, someone who'd mastered smiling without meaning it. I plated the food and carried it out. Compliments came fast. "This is amazing. You always outdo yourself. I don't know how you do it." I smiled because that's what I do. But it didn't reach my chest. Later, when the house finally emptied and the silence returned, I stood alone in the kitchen washing dishes I didn't remember using. And that's when it hit me, I wasn't tired because I cooked. I was tired because nobody ever asked if I wanted to. That's when my phone buzzed on the counter. One message, unknown number, and somehow I already knew this night wasn't just about dinner anymore. I stared at that message, realizing the life I'd built on being needed was about to confront me with a truth I wasn't ready to face. The message that didn't belong. I didn't open the message right away. I knew if I did, something permanent would happen, so I let my phone sit there on the counter, face down, vibrating softly like it was impatient with me. The dishes were done. The kitchen was clean. Everything looked normal, too normal for the way my chest felt. Finally, I picked up the phone. "Unknown number, I didn't think you'd still be feeding everyone. We need to talk." I read it twice, then again, my fingers went cold. There was only one person who would phrase it like that. Only one person who knew how much of my life had revolved around taking care of others and who had walked away when it got too heavy. I locked the phone and leaned against the counter, staring at the wall like it might ground me. 8 years, that's how long it had been since I last heard from Marissa Hale. No calls, no apologies, no explanations, just absence. I told myself I didn't care anymore, that I'd moved on, that people disappear all the time and life keeps going, but my heart didn't believe any of that. From the living room, I heard laughter. Someone had forgotten their coat and come back for it. The sound felt intrusive, like joy wasn't allowed in that moment. When the door finally closed again, the house went quiet for real. I typed a response, deleted it, typed again. Finally, I sent one sentence. "Me, who is this?" The reply came almost instantly. "Too fast. Unknown number, don't do that, Lena. It's Marissa." My name on the screen felt heavier than it should have. I sat down at the kitchen table, phone shaking slightly in my hand. "Me, how did you get this number?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then came back. "Marissa, I never deleted it." That hurt more than I expected. I stared at the clock, watching the second hand move like it was counting down something important. "Me, why now?" This time the pause was longer, intentional. "Marissa, because I'm back in town. And because there's something you deserved to know a long time ago." I closed my eyes, back. That word alone was enough to make my stomach twist. She didn't just leave me, she left a version of my life unfinished. And now she was standing at the door of it again like time hadn't passed. Me, I don't think that's a good idea. Another pause. Marissa, I know, but avoiding it didn't make it go away, did it? I hated how right she sounded. I stood up and paced the kitchen, footsteps echoing. Everything in this room held history, meals, arguments, late-night tears I never told anyone about. Me, say what you need to say, here. The reply came slower, heavier. Marissa. I left because I was scared, not because I stopped caring. I laughed out loud, sharp, bitter. Me, you don't vanish for 8 years because you're scared. No response. Then finally, Marissa, I found out something the night before I left. Something that changed everything. I didn't know how to tell you, and I was afraid you'd choose duty over truth. My heart skipped. Duty, that word again. Me, you don't get to decide what I would have chosen. The dots appeared, then disappeared. One last message came through. Marissa, I know, and that's what I regret most. I set the phone down slowly, because suddenly I knew this wasn't about the past anymore. Whatever Marissa was bringing back with her, it was about to rewrite my future. I didn't sleep that night because deep down I knew the truth she was hiding was something I could never unknow once I heard it. What she left unsaid, I told myself I wouldn't meet her. That was the plan I repeated all morning while I made coffee I didn't drink and stared at a phone that refused to stay quiet. But plans and reality have never really respected each other in my life. By noon, my hands were shaking for reasons that had nothing to do with caffeine. Marissa, I'm at the corner cafe on Linden. I'll be here for an hour. No pressure. Just an hour. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She already knew I'd come. She always did know me better than I liked. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and nostalgia. The kind of place people went to feel productive while avoiding their actual lives. Marissa was already there, sitting by the window, hands wrapped around a mug like she needed the heat. She looked different. Not older, just heavier in the eyes, like life had stopped being theoretical for her too. Lena, she said softly when she saw me. I didn't hug her. I didn't smile. I sat down and crossed my arms like I was bracing for impact. You said there was something I deserved to know, I said, so say it. She nodded like she'd expected my tone. I will, but not like this. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. My stomach dropped. It was worn at the edges, folded more than once like it had been carried and recarried. And written across the front in handwriting I recognized instantly was my name. That's my mother's handwriting, I whispered. Marissa swallowed. She gave it to me the last time I saw her. I stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. Why didn't she give it to me herself? Because you were always busy taking care of everyone else, Marissa said gently. And because she was afraid you'd read it like an instruction instead of permission. That stung. I opened the envelope slowly. Lena, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't find the right moment to say it out loud. You've always been the strong one, the one who steps in before anyone even asks. My chest tightened, but strength doesn't mean endless sacrifice, and love isn't meant to feel like a job description. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking too much. She knew, I said. She saw this coming. Marissa nodded. She worried you learned too early that being useful is the same as being loved. I folded the letter and set it down. And you? I asked. What did you know that made you leave? Marissa looked away, eyes fixed on the window. I found out something about myself, about my health, and about the kind of future I wasn't ready for. I waited. I didn't trust myself not to lean on you, she continued, and I didn't want you staying out of obligation. That word again, obligation. You didn't trust me, I said. I didn't trust the situation, she replied. And I was wrong. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, she reached into her bag again. This time she pulled out her phone. I need you to see something, she said. She turned the screen toward me. It was a photo. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, standing on a kitchen chair, stirring something in a pot with total concentration. Flour on her cheeks, serious eyes. My breath caught. That's not funny, I said quietly. Don't do that. Marissa didn't smile. That's Emily, she said, and she's connected to you in a way you're not expecting. The room tilted. What are you talking about? I whispered. Marissa met my eyes, steady and unflinching. I didn't just come back to apologize, she said. I came back because your life isn't only yours anymore. I stared at that photo, realizing whatever truth Marissa was about to reveal was about to shatter the careful balance I'd built my life on. The truth I wasn't ready to hold. I didn't take my eyes off the photo. The little girl looked serious in the way only children do when they're concentrating on something important. She was standing on a chair, stirring a pot like she owned the kitchen, like she belonged there. My kitchen. That's not possible, I said, even though I hadn't asked the question out loud yet. Marissa didn't rush me. She never did when things got heavy. That used to be one of the reasons I loved her. Her name is Emily, she said carefully. She's 7, I swallowed. Why are you showing me this? Marissa folded her hands on the table. Because you deserve the truth even if it's late. I shook my head. You're talking in circles. She took a slow breath. Emily is your niece. The word landed oddly, relief mixed with confusion. My sister doesn't have kids, I said. She didn't, Marissa replied. Not that you knew about. My heart started racing. She explained it slowly. How my younger sister, Rachel, had gotten pregnant years ago during a rough period in her life, how she'd panicked. How she'd asked Marissa for help because she didn't know who else to trust. And my sister just didn't tell me, I asked, my voice barely holding together. She wanted to, Marissa said quickly. She planned to, but then things spiraled. And then she got sick. The cafe suddenly felt too small, too loud. She passed away 2 years ago, Marissa continued softly. Emily's been in foster care since, temporary placements, nothing stable. I gripped the edge of the table. And no one thought to call me, Marissa's eyes filled. Your mother knew. She was trying to figure out how to tell you. That's why she wrote the letter. The letter. I closed my eyes, pieces snapping together in ways I didn't like. So you left, I said, voice shaking, knowing all this. I left because I was scared, Marissa said, and because I didn't think you'd survive carrying one more responsibility. That sentence broke something open inside me. Everyone always decided what I could handle. I stood up, pacing the small space between tables. So you come back now because what? Emily ran out of options? Marissa nodded. Her current placement ends next month. I stopped moving. And you thought I should know now? I asked. I thought you should know before someone else decided her future without you, she said. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. A niece I never knew existed. A sister who died without telling me. A child stirring a pot in a kitchen that looked too much like mine. Does she know about me? I asked. Marissa hesitated. She knows she has an aunt who cooks. That hit harder than it should have. Why didn't you just tell me back then? I asked. Marissa met my eyes. Because you were already drowning. And I was afraid you'd save everyone again and lose yourself completely. I laughed quietly. Looks like that didn't work out. She reached across the table but didn't touch my hand. I didn't come back to ask you to fix this, she said. I came back because you deserve a choice. A choice, I repeated. I looked at Emily's photo one more time, the way she held the spoon. The way she leaned into the counter like she belonged. I felt something shift in my chest, slow, heavy, unavoidable. Because suddenly this wasn't just about my past. It was about whether I was willing to let my life change again. I walked out of that cafe knowing one thing for sure. Whatever decision I made next would change more than just my own life. The child I didn't know I was missing. I didn't go home after the cafe. I walked, no direction, just movement. Like if I stopped, the weight of everything Marissa had said would finally crush me. A niece, my sister's child. A little girl who stirred pots in kitchens and didn't know my name, only the idea of me. I replayed Marissa's words over and over. Foster care, temporary placements, no stability. That last part stuck. Because stability had always been my thing, the thing people leaned on, the thing that quietly drained me while everyone else stayed comfortable. When I finally made it home, the house felt different, smaller. Like it was waiting for a voice that had never lived there before. I stood in my kitchen and stared at the extra chair tucked into the corner, the one I only pulled out when guests came. For the first time, I dragged it to the table and left it there. I didn't know why, I just knew it felt right. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face, the serious focus. The confidence of a child who didn't yet know how fragile belonging could be. The next morning, I called Marissa. Tell me about her, I said before she could say hello. There was a pause, then relief. She's smart, Marissa said. Quiet at first, watches everything, loves cooking shows, says kitchens feel safe. Of course she did. Does she ask about family? I asked. All the time. That answer hurt more than I expected. By noon, I was sitting in my car outside the county building, hands locked around the steering wheel. I hadn't planned to come here. My body just brought me. Inside, everything smelled like disinfectant and paperwork. A woman at the desk asked how she could help, and for a second I couldn't speak. I think my niece is in the system, I finally said. And I didn't know, she nodded gently like she'd heard this before. Like this wasn't the first time life had arrived late. There were forms, questions, dates I struggled to remember, proof of things I'd never thought to prove. When I left, my head was pounding, but my path was suddenly clear. I wasn't deciding if I cared, I was deciding how much of my life I was willing to rearrange to show it. That evening, my phone buzzed. Marissa, her caseworker wants to meet you. My stomach flipped. Meet when, Marissa? Tomorrow. If you're sure, sure. I laughed out loud at that. I'd never been sure about anything in my life the way people wanted me to be. I'd just shown up, fixed things, fed people, held everything together quietly. But this wasn't a dinner party, this was a child. I stood in my kitchen again, imagining a small voice asking questions, imagining mornings that weren't rushed, imagining messes I wouldn't apologize for. And for the first time, the thought didn't exhaust me. It scared me, but it didn't exhaust me. I texted back, I'll be there. I set the phone down and leaned against the counter, breathing slowly. Because whether I was ready or not, someone out there needed an aunt who wouldn't disappear. And I had a feeling, once I met Emily, there would be no turning back. As I turned off the kitchen light that night, I realized the question was no longer, can I do this? But what kind of life am I willing to build for her? The meeting that changed the shape of my life. The office didn't look the way I imagined it would. I expected cold, sterile, harsh. Instead, it was beige and quiet, with a small plant in the corner that looked like it was trying its best to survive on neglect. The caseworker's name was Dana Brooks. She had kind eyes and a voice that knew how to slow down bad news. "You're Emily's maternal aunt," she said, flipping through a folder. "You weren't listed originally." "I didn't know she existed," I replied. Saying it out loud still felt unreal. Dana nodded. "That happens more than people think." That sentence sat heavy, comforting and terrifying at the same time. She asked me about my life, my job, my home, my schedule, whether I traveled, whether I had support, whether I understood what temporary placement actually meant. Temporary, she explained, can turn permanent very fast. I didn't answer right away because that word permanent used to scare me. Now it felt like a dare. "Can I meet her?" I asked. Dana smiled gently. "She's cautious with new adults, but yes, if you'd like." Emily walked in 10 minutes later. She was smaller than the photo suggested, thinner, guarded. She stopped just inside the door, hands clenched in the straps of her backpack like she might bolt. "This is Lena," Dana said softly. "Your aunt." Emily studied me, not shy, observant. "You cook," she said. It wasn't a question. I smiled. "Yeah, I do," she nodded, as if confirming a theory, then sat down, careful to leave space between us. No hugging, no rush, just air. We talked about safe things, school, favorite shows, what foods she hated. She said she liked scrambled eggs, but only if they weren't sad. I laughed before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked up at the sound, surprised, then curious. When the hour was up, Dana stood. "Emily, would you like to come back next week?" Emily glanced at me just once, then nodded. Outside, my hands were shaking. Marissa found me in the hallway. "You okay?" "I think so," I said. "I didn't mess it up," she smiled softly. "You didn't." That night, I rearranged my kitchen without thinking, moved the knives, cleared a lower cabinet, put the extra chair right where it belonged. I told myself it was practical. It wasn't. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, background checks, home visits, and 1,000 moments of doubt that crept in late at night. What if I failed her? What if I disappeared like everyone else had? On the morning of our first unsupervised visit, I barely ate. Emily arrived with her backpack and that same serious expression. "Can we cook?" she asked immediately. I swallowed. "Yeah. We can." She climbed onto the chair like she'd done it 100 times, cracked eggs with concentration, watched the pan like it mattered. "This feels quiet," she said. I nodded. "Quiet can be good." She stirred slowly. "Do I have to leave?" The question landed without warning. I crouched down so we were eye level. "Not today." She searched my face. And that's when I understood this wasn't about custody, it was about trust. And trust doesn't ask politely, it waits to see if you stay. As Emily stirred the eggs beside me, I realized loving her wasn't the risk. The real risk was whether I was brave enough to let her believe I wouldn't disappear. The first time she called it home, I didn't expect the silence to scare me. Emily had been with me for 3 hours and the apartment was quiet in that comfortable, held breath kind of way. No TV blaring, no nervous chatter. Just the soft scrape of a spoon against a bowl as she mixed pancake batter like it was a serious responsibility. "You measure with your eyes," she said, watching me pour milk. "That's brave," I laughed. "Or reckless," she smiled, small, quick, but it was the first one that felt unguarded. We ate pancakes standing at the counter because I hadn't bought a kid-sized table yet. Syrup dripped everywhere. She didn't apologize. I didn't ask her to. It felt like progress. Later, she wandered through the apartment, touching things without picking them up, counting picture frames, opening the hall closet. "Can I see your room?" she asked. I hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "Sure." She stood in the doorway, looking around like she was mapping exits. "Safety, distance, options. This is where you sleep," she said. "Yeah," she nodded once. "Okay." That night when I tucked her into the pull-out bed I'd set up in the living room, she asked, "Do you snore?" "Only when I'm really tired." She considered that. "I snore when I'm nervous." "I won't tell," I said. She turned toward the wall, then quietly, "You didn't make me move my stuff." "No," I said. "You can when you want." A long pause. "Thank you," she whispered. The next morning Dana called. "You did great yesterday," she said. Emily seemed calmer. I leaned against the counter, phone pressed to my ear. "She's careful," Dana hummed softly. "That's a child who's learned not to expect permanence." That word again. By the third visit, Emily stopped asking where the bathroom was. She left her shoes by the door. She corrected me when I forgot to salt the pasta water. "Food tastes scared if you don't," she said seriously. Marissa noticed the change before I did. "She's settling," she said one afternoon, watching Emily draw at the table. "That scares people." "Why?" I asked. "Because settling means she's trusting the ground," Marissa replied. "And if the ground moves," that night Emily asked if she could leave a toothbrush in my bathroom. I bought her a blue one the next day. A week later, Dana scheduled a longer visit. Overnight, I barely slept the night before. Emily arrived with a duffel bag that looked too small for a life. "Is this okay?" she asked, holding it up. "It's perfect," I said. We cooked dinner together. She stirred. I chopped. Music played low. She hummed without realizing it. After dinner, she sat cross-legged on the couch and said, "My other place didn't let me help." I kept my voice even. "You help here." She nodded like that answered something bigger. Later, as I turned off the lights, she tugged my sleeve. "Lena?" "Yeah, if I mess up, do I have to leave?" My chest tightened. I knelt in front of her. "No." She searched my face like she was scanning for fine print. "No," she repeated. "No," I said again. "Not for that." She climbed into bed and pulled the blanket up to her chin. "Okay," she said softly. "Then I'll try." I stood there longer than necessary, listening to her breathing even out. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. She wasn't asking for perfection. She was asking for permission to stay. As Emily fell asleep in my living room, I understood that loving her meant more than offering space. It meant deciding whether I was ready to let her call it home. If I let her stay, the word home didn't leave my head the next morning. Emily woke up before I did. I knew because I smelled toast, slightly burnt, and heard the soft scrape of a chair being dragged across the kitchen floor. I rushed in, heart racing. She froze, butter knife midair. "I was careful," she said quickly. "I didn't touch the stove." I exhaled. "Okay, thank you for telling me." She relaxed a little. "You said I could help." "I did," I said. "Helping also means asking first." She nodded like she was filing that rule away for later. We ate toast together, legs dangling from our chairs. She didn't talk much. Just watched me like she was studying how mornings worked here. After breakfast, Dana called. "I want to talk about next steps," she said. Next steps always sounded like something people said right before life changed. "At this point," Dana continued, "Emily is eligible for kinship placement with you." My chest tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said gently, "that if you agree, this stops being temporary." I stared at Emily across the table. She was lining up her crayons by color, careful and precise. "How long do I have to decide?" I asked. "Not long," Dana replied. "She's been moved too many times already." After the call, I cleaned the kitchen twice. Rearranged cabinets, wiped counters that were already clean. Emily watched quietly. "You're nervous," she said. I smiled. "A little." Is it my fault? I stopped moving, knelt in front of her. No, I said firmly. Never, she studied my face. My other place said that too, right before I left. That hit hard. I spent the afternoon calling people I hadn't spoken to in years, old friends, a cousin, anyone who might count as a support system. Most were surprised, some were kind. One said, "Wow, that's a lot." It was that evening Marissa came by. "She seems happy," she said quietly, watching Emily color at the table. "She's careful," I replied. "There's a difference," Marissa nodded. "Are you thinking about it?" "I am," I said, "and that scares me." "Why?" "Because if I say yes," I said, voice low, "there's no pretending anymore. No going back to just being the person who helps and then rests." Marissa leaned against the counter. "You've never really rested." Emily looked up. "Are you talking about me?" I hesitated. "Yes," I said honestly. "But not in a bad way." She considered that. "I don't need a lot." That broke my heart a little. That night after Emily went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the extra chair. I thought about the version of my life that was quiet but empty, predictable, controlled, and the version that was messy, loud, uncertain but full. My phone buzzed. "Dana, I need your answer by Friday." I looked down the hallway toward the living room where Emily slept with the light on low because she still didn't like full darkness. I realized something then. She wasn't waiting for a perfect guardian. She was waiting to see if I would choose her, even when choosing her meant changing everything. As Friday crept closer, I knew my decision wouldn't just define Emily's future, it would finally force me to choose what kind of life I was brave enough to live. What saying yes would cost me. Friday arrived faster than I expected. I woke up with that familiar pressure in my chest, the kind that shows up when a decision is overdue and pretending otherwise isn't an option anymore. Emily was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the couch, flipping through a cookbook she couldn't fully read yet. "These pictures are lies," she said seriously. "Nobody's kitchen looks that clean." I smiled. "You're right. Real kitchens are messy." She seemed relieved by that. While she colored, I paced the apartment, phone in hand, Dana's message replaying in my mind. "I need your answer by Friday. No extensions, no maybes." I thought about what saying yes would actually mean. Less overtime, fewer last-minute favors, canceling plans without explaining myself, learning how to ask for help, something I'd avoided my whole adult life. I thought about the people who liked me best when I was useful, who praised me when I gave but got uncomfortable when I set limits. Those relationships would change, some would disappear. And as scary as that was, something else scared me more. Emily looking at me one day and realizing I'd chosen comfort over her. Marissa stopped by in the afternoon. She watched Emily carefully fold paper airplanes at the table. "She's getting attached," Marissa said quietly. "I know," I replied. "And you?" I didn't answer right away. "Then I'm afraid I'll fail her." Marissa nodded. "That fear doesn't go away. You just stop letting it make decisions for you." Emily looked up. "What decisions?" I met her eyes, big ones. She tilted her head. "Do they hurt?" "Sometimes," I admitted, "but they can also make things better." She considered that. "I think better is worth some hurt." That kid had a way of cutting straight through me. That evening, my phone rang. It was my boss. "I heard you've been distracted lately," she said. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then told the truth, some of it anyway. There was a pause. "That's a lot," she finally said. "If you need flexibility, we'll talk. But you'll have to be clear about your limits." Limits? Another word I was still learning how to use. After dinner, Emily sat beside me on the couch, knees tucked under her chin. "Can I stay here?" she asked softly. I swallowed. "You're here now?" She shook her head. "I mean, like, for real." The room went quiet. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I'm thinking about it very hard." She nodded like that was acceptable. "Thinking is good." That night after she fell asleep, I stood in the kitchen again, my old place of decisions. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who believed being needed was the same thing as being loved. The one who said yes because saying no felt selfish. And then I thought about Emily's small hand tugging my sleeve, her careful questions, her quiet hope. I picked up my phone and typed me. "I'm ready to talk." I didn't hit send right away. I took one last look down the hallway, then I pressed it. Because sometimes choosing someone else is the first time you finally choose yourself. As I waited for Dana's reply, I realized the hardest part wasn't committing, it was accepting that my life would never be small again. The day I stopped being convenient, Dana called me the next morning. I got your message, she said. If you're serious, we need to move fast. Serious. That word carried weight. It wasn't emotional, it wasn't poetic, it was practical: appointments, background checks, court dates, school paperwork. It meant my life would no longer be something I could rearrange quietly at the last minute. I'm serious, I said. Emily sat at the table across from me, drawing a house with a chimney that was way too big. She didn't know what was happening, she just knew I'd stopped pacing. Dana explained the process: temporary kinship placement, home inspections, interviews, nothing dramatic, just thorough. Designed to protect children from adults who thought love was enough. When I hung up, I realized my hands were shaking. Emily looked up. Are you mad? No, I said, just nervous. She nodded like that made sense. Nervous means you care, I smiled. She was right. Again, the first call I made after that wasn't to Marissa, it was to my sister-in-law's old friend, someone who'd helped my sister years ago. I needed pieces of a history I'd never been told. The stories were messy, not tragic, just human: fear, silence, decisions made too late. By the end of the day, I understood something important. Emily didn't need a perfect backstory. She needed a present one. The home inspection was scheduled for Wednesday. I cleaned like my life depended on it, then stopped halfway through and laughed at myself. This wasn't about spotless counters. It was about whether there was space emotionally and physically. Wednesday came. The inspector noticed the lower cabinet with plastic cups, the step stool by the counter, the nightlight in the hallway. You prepared, she said. I listened, I replied. That night my phone buzzed again, a text from my boss. We need to talk about your availability. I stared at it longer than I should have. This was the part nobody warned you about, the quiet consequences. The moments where choosing someone else meant disappointing people who were used to your yes. The next day I had that conversation. I can still do my job, I said, just not at the cost of everything else. My boss studied me. Then nodded slowly. Let's try it. Not a promise, but a start. Emily noticed the shift before anyone else. You didn't answer your phone at dinner, she said. I didn't need to, I replied. She smiled like that mattered. Later that night she stood in the doorway of the living room. Lena, yeah, if I stay, will you get tired of me? The question hit deeper than I expected. I knelt in front of her. I'll get tired sometimes, of laundry, of messes. Of being scared. She watched my face carefully. But not of you, I finished. She nodded once, then stepped forward and hugged me quick, fierce, like she was afraid to ask for more. I held her gently, heart pounding. Because in that moment I knew something irreversible had happened. I wasn't the woman people relied on anymore. I was the woman someone depended on, and there was no going back from that. As Emily fell asleep that night, I realized the real test wasn't whether I could protect her, it was whether I was strong enough to let my old life fall away. The truth that doesn't ask permission. I thought once I said yes, the hardest part would be over. I was wrong. The hardest part wasn't the paperwork or the home visits or even the quiet fear that crept in at night. The hardest part was realizing how many people were uncomfortable with the version of me that no longer said yes automatically. It showed up in small ways: friends who stopped inviting me last minute, family members who asked questions that sounded supportive but felt judgmental, coworkers who smiled a little tighter when I left on time. Emily noticed before I did. You don't laugh the same, she said one evening as we folded laundry together. I paused. Is that bad? She shrugged. Just different. Different wasn't bad, but it wasn't easy either. A few days later, Dana called again. We need to talk about Emily's father, she said carefully. My stomach dropped. What about him? There's a name on the birth certificate, Dana continued. He hasn't been involved. But legally, we're required to notify him before anything becomes permanent. The room felt suddenly smaller. I thought he wasn't in the picture, I said. He hasn't been, Dana replied, but the system doesn't care about effort. It cares about rights. That night I didn't sleep. I watched Emily breathe in the soft glow of the nightlight, wondering how much control I actually had. I'd rearranged my entire life, but there were still pieces that didn't belong to me. The next day, Marissa came over. They found him, she said quietly, or at least they think they did. I sank into a chair. What does he want? Marissa hesitated. To talk. That's all he's asked for so far. Emily walked in at that moment holding a crumpled drawing. I made this for you, she said. It was a picture of the two of us in the kitchen, me at the stove, her on a chair beside me. A crooked heart floating above our heads. I smiled and thanked her like my world wasn't tilting. That afternoon, Dana called again. He wants to meet her, she said. When? I asked. Soon. I hung up and stared at the wall. Emily sat beside me. Did I do something wrong? No, I said quickly. Never. Then why do you look scared? Because I was, not of losing her, of her realizing adults don't always keep the ground steady beneath you. That night after Emily went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, my old thinking place. I realized something then. Love doesn't protect you from uncertainty, it just makes the uncertainty matter more. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. I had no control over what he'd say, over what he might promise, over how Emily might look at him and wonder. All I could control was whether I stayed honest, whether I stayed present, and whether I trusted that choosing her even now still mattered. As I turned off the kitchen light, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. This is Emily's father, we need to talk. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Because some truths don't wait for you to be ready, they arrive anyway and demand everything. As I held my phone in the dark, I knew the next conversation could undo everything I'd built or prove that love doesn't disappear just because someone else shows up. When the past knocks, I didn't reply to the message right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because every possible answer felt like it would open a door I wasn't ready to stand in. This is Emily's father, we need to talk. I stared at the words until they blurred. Somewhere down the hall, Emily was asleep, her soft breathing steady, trusting. That trust sat heavy on my chest. I finally typed back, me, about what? The reply came a minute later, him. About Emily, I didn't know where she was, I didn't know about you. That sentence was doing a lot of work. Didn't know. People always found new ways to say I wasn't there. We agreed to meet at Dana's office. Neutral ground, witnesses, boundaries. I spent the next 2 days in a fog, working, cooking, laughing at Emily's jokes like my heart wasn't racing underneath it all. On the morning of the meeting, Emily watched me put on my jacket. You look like you're going somewhere important, she said. I am, I replied, but I'll be back. She nodded, then paused. You always come back. I smiled, even though my throat tightened. I do. Dana's office felt colder this time. He was already there when I arrived. Thomas Reed, early 40s, clean jacket, nervous hands, the kind of man who looked like he practiced regret in private. He stood when he saw me. Lena, I didn't shake his hand. Dana set the rules quickly. This wasn't a negotiation, it was information sharing, child first, always. I didn't know, Thomas said again, as if repetition made it cleaner. Rachel and I lost touch, I found out late. By the time I looked, she was gone. I believed he believed that. That didn't make it okay. I'm not here to take Emily, he added quickly. I just want to know her. Those words landed heavier than I expected. Dana watched me carefully. Any contact would be supervised at first, she said. If it happens at all. I nodded. Thomas looked relieved, too relieved. Emily's stable right now, I said. That matters. I don't want to disrupt her, he said. I just want a chance. A chance. That word again. I left the meeting with no clear answers, just timelines, possibilities, and the knowledge that my control was partial at best. At home, Emily was waiting at the door. Did you fix the important thing? She asked. I knelt and hugged her. I worked on it. She leaned into me. That's good. That night after she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off. I thought about all the adults who came and went in her life, each with reasons, explanations, stories, and I thought about what mattered most. Not biology, not paperwork, not who showed up late, but who stayed. My phone buzzed again. Dana, we need to talk tomorrow. There's been a development. I closed my eyes, because every time I thought the ground was steady, life found a way to remind me stability isn't something you're given. It's something you fight for. As I stared into the dark kitchen, I realized the next decision wouldn't be about fear or fairness. It would be about what kind of adult Emily would remember when this was over. The choice that doesn't make noise. Dana didn't soften her voice this time. We received a formal request, she said. Emily's father wants supervised visitation to begin next week. I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, staring at the magnet-covered fridge like it might intervene. Does Emily know? I asked. No, Dana replied, and I'd prefer she hears it from you. Of course she would. After the call, I didn't move for a long time. I just listened to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of Emily humming in the living room. She was building something out of blocks, careful, precise, always building. I sat beside her on the floor. I said gently, can we talk for a minute? She looked up immediately. Did I do something wrong? No, I said. This isn't about that. She waited. She was good at waiting, too good. There's someone who wants to meet you, I continued. Someone who knew your mom a long time ago. Her shoulders tensed. Another helper. I chose my words carefully. Your dad. She didn't react right away, just stared at the blocks like they'd betrayed her. He didn't want me before, she said quietly. My heart cracked. Sometimes adults make terrible choices. Not because of kids, but because of themselves. She considered that. Do I have to go? No, I said firmly. Nothing happens without talking about it first. She leaned into my side, small but steady. Will you be there? Yes, I said without hesitation. Every time. The visit happened in a bright room with too many chairs and not enough warmth. Thomas arrived early. He brought a book, a gift bag. Apologies folded neatly into his posture. Emily sat beside me, legs swinging. He spoke carefully, too carefully. She answered politely, distant, like she was interviewing him. When it was over, she didn't cry. That scared me more than if she had. At home that night, she sat at the counter while I cooked. He kept saying sorry, she said. I know, sorry doesn't fix stuff, she added. No, I agreed. But sometimes it starts something. She watched the pot bubble. I don't want him to take you away. I turned off the stove and knelt in front of her. No one takes me away from you, she searched my face. Promise, I nodded. Promise? The next morning, Dana called again. There's pressure from his lawyer, she said. He's asking for expanded visitation. My chest tightened. Is that likely? It depends, she said carefully, on how things progress. On what the court believes is best. Best, that word again. I spent the day cleaning, then stopped halfway through and laughed at myself. Control was an illusion. The only thing I could control was how I showed up. That night, I sat on the edge of Emily's bed while she brushed her teeth. You staying? She asked. Yes, she nodded, relieved. Okay, then I'm okay too. After she fell asleep, I returned to the kitchen and stared at the extra chair, no longer extra. I understood something then. The biggest choices aren't loud. They don't announce themselves. They're made quietly in kitchens, in promises kept, in showing up again and again. My phone buzzed. Dana. The court date has been moved up. My heart skipped. Because now everything I'd built was about to be tested by a decision I couldn't make alone. As the date on the screen stared back at me, I realized the final choice wouldn't be mine to make, but the way I stood beside Emily would be remembered forever. The place I chose to stand, the courtroom, wasn't dramatic. No gasps, no shouting, just neutral walls, uncomfortable chairs, and adults pretending decisions about children could ever be simple. Emily sat beside me, feet not touching the floor, hands folded tight in her lap. I rested my hand over hers, not to hold her in place, but to remind her she wasn't alone. Thomas sat across the room, quiet, polite. Hopeful in a way that felt rehearsed. His lawyer whispered things to him. He nodded at the right moments. Dana caught my eye and gave a small, reassuring nod. When it was my turn to speak, my voice surprised me. It didn't shake. I didn't plan for this, I said. I didn't know Emily existed until recently, but from the moment she walked into my kitchen, she became part of my life. The judge listened, not emotionally, carefully. I'm not here to compete with anyone, I continued. I'm here to provide stability, consistency, a home where she knows the rules won't change overnight. Emily squeezed my hand. Thomas spoke next, apologized, explained, promised. I believed he meant it. That didn't mean he was ready. The decision wasn't immediate. It rarely is. But the temporary order was clear. Emily would remain with me. Supervised visits would continue. Everything else would be evaluated slowly. Slow felt like mercy. Outside, Emily looked up at the sky like she was checking if the world had shifted. Do I still live with you? She asked. Yes, I said. You do. She nodded once, like that was all she needed. Life didn't suddenly become easy after that. There were hard mornings, therapy appointments, questions Emily didn't yet have words for, days when I doubted myself quietly, late at night, standing in the kitchen where all my thinking happens. But there were also ordinary miracles. Saturday pancakes, homework at the counter, music playing while we cleaned up together. One night, Emily pulled a chair beside me while I cooked. You don't cook for everyone anymore, she said. I smiled. No, just for us. She leaned her chin on the counter. That's better. Weeks later, the final decision came through: permanent kinship guardianship, not because Thomas was a bad man, but because Emily needed a life that didn't keep changing shape. I signed the papers with a calm I didn't recognize, because by then I wasn't proving anything. I was simply standing where I belonged. That night, after Emily fell asleep, I stood alone in the kitchen. Same stove, same clock, same quiet, but I wasn't invisible anymore. I thought back to the woman I used to be, the one who believed love meant saying yes to everyone. Turns out love means knowing who to say yes for. I turned off the light and walked down the hall. Tomorrow morning, someone would ask what was for breakfast. And for the first time in my life, that question didn't feel like a burden. It felt like home. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Some families are built by blood, others are built by choice, and sometimes the quiet decisions matter the most. Thank you for listening. If this story stayed with you, please like and subscribe. Some stories aren't loud, they find a home in you quietly.